We are talking about all things in this crazy market this evening. And of course, we have a phenomenal guest to help kind of peel back some of the layers of what's going on in this real estate market. Is it a bubble? Are we crashing? Chicken Little, the sky is falling. Britt Fair, founder of Fair Texas Title and no stranger to the title business for decades. Thank you, Britt, for joining us this evening.
Hey, thank you for enduring my hot air. I'm glad to be here.
Hey, you know what? You're in good company, which is why I invited you on the show.
Perfect.
But, you know, there's so many things going on right now. I don't think any of us thought that the market could increase or get even more aggressive than it had been this past year. And I heard a stat at our board meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they actually went back and said, we just didn't want to see year over year. We wanted to actually take 2 years. So back to this time in 2020, we are down 80% overall of inventory in our marketplace. 80%.
I believe it. It was like a memo went out, you know. It like everybody needed a COVID playbook, and the playbook was, hey, why don't we buy houses? So
why don't we buy houses? I mean, obviously shelter became the most important thing to everybody, even though it wasn't, you know, we were already there. But I mean, we were strapped in 2020 before even the pandemic hit as far as inventory went. I never thought I would say, I want COVID inventory to come back. And that's really where we are at this point. But there's a lot of contributing factors. And when we were talking the other day, it was more of framing this in an appropriate way. Because if you just sit there and say, interest rates are rising, offers are, you know, multiplying, you know, 50 per house, all of these other things, you know, affordable housing market is gone. And like I said, everybody's acting like the sky is falling, but really we have a duty to frame this appropriately and really kind of not set the record straight, but give some extra talking points, especially as realtors, when people ask us, oh my gosh, are we headed for another, you know, housing bubble? You know, is this going to burst? Is this like 2007? You know, what should we be, you know, bracing for? So I know that's a loaded question, but first I'd love to kind of hear you sum up how you're maybe phrasing this lovely market in regards to the immediate forecast.
Well, you alluded earlier to this being a super hot market, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the term hot market needs to be framed. I go out sort of on a limb, and I think people ultimately understand this and agree with this, but that this market has not been a healthy market that we've been in. Like, it has been too hot, right? I mean, there has been all this cash sloshing around due to lots of, you know, pandemic stimulus and Federal Reserve quantitative easing and various, you know, just lots of things that are sort of unnatural. And it has created an excess of demand for a lot of things, including houses. And so, you know, when I hear people saying, oh my gosh, the market may turn bad, and I keep thinking the market has been unhealthy. It's been unhealthy on the hot side. And so we really need it to cool off somewhat to get back to some sense of normalcy. It is just, you know, it's not normal for somebody to have to put an offer on a house, you know, in the first hour of seeing it, or even without seeing it, you know, with just a virtual tour, because they're worried that if they have to, you know, wait a day or two to see the house, they'll miss out on the house. You know, that's just not a normal market, but we've gotten used to it over the last couple of years. And so that's the first thing I would frame on the housing side is I do think the housing market is going to cool down for some of these factors, but we need it to cool down. Like, cooling down will actually be a positive thing. It's not usually viewed as a positive thing, but we need to get supply and demand back into something closer to an equilibrium so that people can patiently buy and patiently sell and not be scared to sell. And you know, so anyway, that's the first thing I would say is the market has been super hot to an extreme. And so we need some of these things to cool down the market a lot. And I don't think, well, we can go into what all that looks like.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right. And again, as realtors and as industry professionals, we do need to educate ourselves on how to respond, especially to inflammatory comments and ideas that a lot of people are sitting there saying it's going to happen again. And I had somebody today that was a referral, just kind of talking to them about the market. And they're like, I'm going to sit on the sidelines because I have made my money by being a savvy investor. And this is not a savvy time for somebody like me to purchase. And I said, well, that's great. At the same time, with the supply and demand factor and people moving here 1,000 per day to our area, and we have, I think it was said that if Texas was a country, we'd have the 9th strongest economy in all of the world. And as far as how we're viewing that, so I can't talk about other areas of the country, but on the Texas side, what we do have people putting things into context coming from other areas of the country. I've got a guy that's relocating here from Indianapolis. And he even said, I thought everything was bigger in Texas, but actually my house is bigger and better in Indianapolis. And I started laughing. And I said, within context, and he's like, but I understand. I reset my expectations for what my house is going to sell in Indianapolis. And then I have to reset my expectation of what our budget's going to afford us here in North Texas. But ultimately, he's relocating with another company, with the company that he works for there. And he said in Indianapolis, if you have, an executive level position, you work for this company. That is the only company that basically supplies jobs to that caliber. I said, it's such a great statement that you just made, because I've had multiple people that have come here and said, we're happy to buy a home and set up shop here, not only for us and our jobs, but for the future jobs of our children, because we want them to be able to have a stable and prosperous life and have options in the workforce here where they're going to grow up and graduate school and go to college and be able to lay roots here. And so that was just so interesting. He said it didn't only afford him opportunity for his kids, but what if he wanted to change jobs and go with a different company? He's now going to have the ability to have access to that here.
Absolutely. Well, and again, we've all recognized this for a while, that we are really blessed to be here in the North Texas market for lots of reasons. And that is clearly one of them, that whatever you think of the overall sort of national housing market, if there is even such a thing. But we all know that the national housing market is not totally homogeneous. There are different pockets that differ from one another. Some are better, some are worse. Even in North Texas, some areas are hotter than others. But just like what your example of Indianapolis versus Dallas or DFW, there's really nothing against Indianapolis, and really, I would prefer Indianapolis over Chicago and
sure,
in some places right now. But we're just blessed that of all the places, even of housing as an asset class, that the supply and demand in Dallas-Fort Worth is so out of whack compared to even really any place else, that the savvy investor that you were describing, I would say, I don't think that. I don't think I agree with that person, because where are you going to put money in this environment? As a savvy investor, that the stock market doesn't appear to be a great bet. The bond market is clearly a terrible bet. Holding it in cash. Well, when you have inflation at 8.5%, holding cash, you're losing 8.5% value. So, where are you going to put it? And I would say that in real estate in North Texas is a pretty good, it may or may, there may be better things, but it's pretty high up on the list.
Well, and I think because again, the utility of needing a roof is not going to change. So there's no volatility in needing housing. And so I think that's one of those things. But for him, he was looking at his relocation from the East Coast and South Carolina to Texas again. And he's normally from Texas. But he even said, he's like, my house will sell for a ridiculous amount in South Carolina. I said, well, you are blessed that you're downsizing to half of what your house is going to sell in South Carolina. And you just said it's egregious of what people are willing to pay. So it's a simple credit and debit situation. If you're getting the inflated equity that you perceive in your home in South Carolina, and then you can take a sliver of that inflated equity, Mr. Investor, and then put it into your actual home in Texas, then isn't that still wise? You actually capitalized on a higher asset over there, and then you get to turn it to here. And my other thing is the fact that you're looking at your primary residence as purely as an investment is a problem. And that's how I framed it with him very nicely. But I just basically told him, I said, you know what? I see people drive up in $90,000 cars and are upside down on day one. They'll buy a $25,000 watch. They'll go on a vacation, and not just a beach vacation, Ed, but maybe some sort of vacation, spend $20,000. Half their time, their family's crying because they're maxed out, and you get 2 Instagram-worthy photos. But God forbid you put a little bit more, skin in the game in buying the house that your family is going to live in and spend the majority of their time in.
Yeah, well, and the housing as a utility, I think we got a little bit more of that sanity, put into us over the last couple of years. With as much as we've been, people are actually learning how to use their stovetops for the first time, and
Yes.
those kinds of things. So, I mean, the actual utility of a roof over your head and the functions of your own home, certainly can't be overlooked. But, like I said, I just go back to just because prices seem crazy and they have gone up very fast, and I totally agree with that. But if you look, the inflation numbers that came out today, 8.5% on the consumer price index year over year. And so, are you not going to buy any groceries either? Because
thank you.
You're going to buy groceries. You have, there's certain things you need. You need a roof over your head. You need groceries, and you may cut back on dining out, and you may cut back on luxury automobiles versus whatever. Versus something that's just functional. But
yeah,
you do need a house. You probably do need a car too, but you may not buy quite the same level.
Well, and I think that's a great example because we have gas. We have the cost of a lot of food, meat being one of them. I'm very involved with different things. I'm on the board here at Metrotex and the executive team. I'm also head of Tree Pack for Metrotex, and which has been great. Fundraising for the past 3 years in a pandemic is ideal to take on that role. But for us trying to even plan events now that were in person and that's socially acceptable again, and all of those things, calling to get pricing on venues and menus, what would normally have cost probably, I don't know, $8,000. We got a quote for an event for 100 people on food for $19,000. And so we thought, okay, this is the outlier, right? And we made multiple other calls. And that's what people don't understand is it's across the board. And so, yeah, maybe you don't have the same event. Maybe you don't do the high-end catering, but you still have to have a house. And at some point, you just got to bite the bullet. So what I told this guy, since he's a savvy businessman and investor, was, you know what? I bet on myself all day long. And if I have to put an extra 50 grand in the skin of the game, I have to bet on myself as an entrepreneur and a business owner that I can make that 50 grand back at some point, but that the lifestyle of my family and that quality of life, I can't put a cost on that. Now, I understand for people that can't afford to put that extra skin in the game, and that is tough, that affordable housing price point. I think that's where we really should be putting a lot of our focus on, is not the people that have the equity from selling their home to be able to put in a purchase, but it's the first time home buyer market and the people that are still in that entry level price point that is disappearing more and more every day. And that really is where I feel like our energy and focus should be on. How do we sit there and be able to create quality, affordable housing, in this marketplace? Is that something that you've kind of had discussion with people as far as that being really the hot point that we should focus some energy on?
Well, it's hard to make something out of nothing, right? And as not as a home builder or developer myself, but actually those are things that I think about, even like with, I have kids that are now in college, and I think about the kids
they're going to buy.
Yeah, that age, there are, all the homes that were these $100,000 homes, 10 years ago, they've either been scraped or purchased by these big REITs who buy up all, or whatever, who buy up all the little houses and are renting them out as single family rentals. And, the home builders aren't building any type of volume at the low price points. And, they can't, because the cost of all the materials and labor and land has gone up. So yeah, no, that's going to be the challenge. And usually, I'm usually the guy who likes to make fun of government and the ineptitude of said government. But that is the kind of thing that when you start thinking, okay, if the private sector isn't going to create that, maybe there's a reason, that may be a project that there needs to be something from the public sector that, creates that. Like I said, that's usually, I'm usually not the government intervention guy.
No, I'm not either. But I will. Yeah. The flip side of that is we had Phil Crone from the Dallas Builders Association and Daniel Gonzalez, who is a lobbyist, used to be the chief lobbyist for Texas Realtors, and now he has his own company. And we were talking just about this. And I think what we have to do is educate our realtor partners and industry partners to understand that, yes, there's an issue with supply chain shortages. Yes, there's an issue with our labor force. And we've got to do something about that, because for so long we have told people that get an education, go into debt for $100,000 and get a college degree. And when that is not even something that quantitatively is ever going to give them the ability to earn a higher income, but we pressed the last 20 years on people going through the education system to do that. Now, I bucked against the system. My mother begged me to get a college degree in something more stable. So I got my real estate license like a good disobedient daughter that I was. And now she's sitting there saying, oh my gosh, thank you to listen to me. But for me,
yeah, I think Sherry's pretty happy with how that turned out. So yeah,
she is happy how that turned out. At the same time, it's having that thought go back into the public education system, which I know Phil Crone and the Dallas Builders Association are bringing more education and awareness to Collin College. There's some awesome programs there. For apprenticeships and other things like that, bringing it to DISD. So it starts at the high school frame. But when your average labor in the home building, sector is like 54 years old, that's a problem. And that's also, we can't build them fast enough because we don't have enough labor, and we have labor that's aging up. And then the supply chain shortages on top of that. But the one thing, Britt, that they brought up last week was the regulatory issues. And I think that's something that we can be. I know she's Sherry and her meh face with me.
She gave you the frowny face. There you go.
That's our favorite, because it's so ambiguous. It can be so many things. But that's where I think as an industry as a whole, we can do better about having conversations when regulatory fees, permits, and costs are sometimes in upwards of 20% of the cost of a home because of carrying cost and the fees that the municipalities are instituting. And they're changing them every other day, by the way. And then we're not fast tracking the permitting process. We talked about that, maybe being able to fast track a permitting process when it's in different price points. If it falls under an affordable housing category, under 400,000, that the municipality should be able to fast track that maybe in a 2-week turnaround on permits, instead of, I had one take 16 weeks to get a permit to actually grade the lot and pour the foundation. And that's a problem. So that's where I would love for people to fix that. But those are conversations that we need to be having, because that also means we can change it when we vote on the local level. So I'm going to do my one spiel on voter apathy, because we all want to vote in the national elections or the state elections, but nobody's voting in our local elections for city council members, for the mayoral elections, anything else like that. I mean, you're talking about like 8 to 10%.
Yeah, so, I heard it was even lower than that. I was thinking it was like 6. So
yeah, no, you're absolutely right in certain areas. But then, though, that is actually where so much of the change can happen on that regulatory side, is applying pressure and holding our elected officials accountable. So I'm not going to go down that road because it's boring. But Mr. Ed Eakin, who is actually a former luxury home builder himself, subcontractor shortage and lack of materials probably doesn't seem improvement this year. Both are going to be hard to correct. And I think that's what they said. We're still probably looking at 2023 before we see an ease in both of those things, but that they are seeing it start to recalibrate. Like the cost of lumber has definitely, I think, tempered just a little bit. Still hard to get it. So when you have a supply and demand issue, that means there's also a premium to the cost. But those are things that are difficult. And I hate the sentiment that's in here. Like Christine said, so many first-time home buyers work so hard to finally qualify, and now they can't find a home. And that's the hard part, is trying to advocate for homeownership, which is what we do. And there's no homes for that first-time home buyer sector to actually find something.
Yeah, no, I think you've hit on so many different topics there, but I think, first, we as just regular citizens and parents, coming to the realization that we shouldn't pressure our kids and our kids' friends to all go get the expensive college degree when there are a lot of jobs that can probably end up paying better than some of these jobs that they will get, out of college. And they can start working 4 years earlier and
with no debt.
With no debt and still maybe make more money. So, but it's more of we've all gotten in a weird mindset where, no, my kid has to go to college. I don't care about it, and it's, I like the fact that you bucked some of that pressure a little bit, but clearly it was a great move. But, the other thing that's interesting, and again, this isn't something I've spent a whole lot of time thinking about, but just in thinking about, one of the big issues that has been raised for a long time in the city of Dallas, and the current mayor is also talking about it as well, Mayor Johnson. But just the lack of development in the southern sector, and you start wondering, okay, is there some? I mentioned earlier, is there some way for incentives to get, and again, that would solve some of the land issues maybe. As far as cost of land and whatever, but then we still have the labor and materials problem. So it will take some brainstorming, but
you know what, Britt, and we have to have these conversations so people understand. So the problem with the permit in an affordable housing price point, which is what my people were building, we went under contract in December of 2020. They had an infant at that point. We just closed last month. That's 2022, by the way. And it took 16 weeks to get the permit approved, and it was in Southwest Dallas.
Yeah.
And so that's
I've read a lot of the Builder Association and Phil Crone's comments, and I personally do business in lots of different municipalities throughout North Texas, and there is one that seems to be more notorious than the rest as far as their ability to match the speed and efficiency of other markets. And so that just happens to be the largest one with a D. So.
Yeah, well, largest one with a D. And you know what? I was having conversations with some of my other realtor counterparts. We were actually in Oak Cliff at a restaurant, and it was a gorgeous restaurant. And I'm like, I didn't even know this existed. And they're like, this is so great. We have restaurants and nightlife and shopping and all of these things in Oak Cliff. And I said, wouldn't it be great if within 10-minute drive of here, you actually had some quality, affordable subdivisions? And they're like, we don't. We have the older historical homes. Then we have predatory builders coming in and doing, on the lots and tear downs, putting crap product in there that nobody's really proud to actually purchase, but that's the only affordable product. But then you actually have vast vacant wasteland within 10 minutes of here that sits there in purgatory. Because no developer will actually touch it because it's so cost prohibitive to actually start building there. Yeah. And that's an issue. And that's because that's what I was talking about. I said, there's so many people that would love to be more centric to certain pockets in Dallas, but they're having to push into suburbs of Tarrant County, suburbs of Denton County, suburbs of Collin County,
and Kaufman,
everywhere else. And so when those people would actually buy in Dallas proper, if we could just give them some inventory, which would then relax what's going on in some of these more suburban rural communities that we just talked about, that's traditionally where you would see the more affordable housing product. So permitting isn't the only boogeyman. It is a real thing. Obviously there are, and for right or wrong, questions of safety. And, like when I think of the Cedars, just south of downtown, and when they put that police substation down there, and all of a sudden, like, boom, everybody was interested in it because they felt safe, right? They had a big police station right across the street. And so the Cedars has boomed, and so, I think that, there are a few key issues, but certainly, like I said, I would think if city government could get the permitting process down and also put their heads together on incentivizing construction of affordable homes, in whatever way that means. But there are tax incentives and things that can be done to incentivize that. So I think, that could at least be a start for
I know we may be off topic, but that's
okay. But I think that's what this is. This is just
Yeah.
this is a very raw, approachable format where we can go, oh, look, you got a hi, Britt, Bill Hoyt. I don't know if
Hi, Bill.
Yes. So, but I think that's important because part of this is also getting people engaged in what we do in our industry. And so I want to take a second to say, guys, this is where, as industry professionals, whether you're a realtor or just in the real estate adjacent business, get involved. And I say this every time, if you don't know where to get involved, but you feel fired up to get involved, reach out to me on Facebook, find my contact information. I will help you get plugged in. But I would love to see more people involved in our government affairs, in our tree pack advocacy. I talked to Phil about maybe trying to get some sort of realtor, association, Dallas Builders Association coalition, where we can come from both sides and band together and work smarter instead of harder and really try. Look, everybody says that we're the most influential trade, organization in the state and basically nationally. Well, let's start acting like it, because if we have that much influence, then we really need to start holding people's feet to the fire a little bit more. And I think we can do better. So reach out to me if that's something that you guys want to do. But we actually had a list of things that we were going to touch on. And so I'm going to throw a little bit of that out there. Rates being, I think, the biggest, hot topic right now. So what are you seeing, Britt, on the rate side, and why is that happening?
Well, rates are rising. In case anybody was wondering, we're over 5 on the 30-year mortgages, which, if you haven't been paying close attention and you've been in, maybe you've been a homeowner or something for a long time, or real estate, most real estate professionals have been paying attention. But 5 is a great rate by any historical measure, but it's not a great rate by the measuring of the last, 5 years, right? So,
correct.
And so some people go, oh my gosh, the sky is falling 5%, So I think, why are they rising? Well, mortgage rates and really all interest rates rise and fall with inflation expectations.
Okay.
And so we have this inflation, and again, we can point to lots of things. I mean, supply chains, you mentioned, clearly supply chains remain a problem. They've been a problem ever since COVID hit, and they haven't fixed themselves. So that's things like that are just naturally occurring, and you couldn't do anything. But then there's also some, as I mentioned earlier, or alluded to, just all the monetary stimulus that our governments have passed, and then the quantitative easing, which is the Federal Reserve trying to artificially push down interest rates. And so all these things have been very stimulative of the market. And when, overstimulation causes inflation. And so we're at 40-year highs. Like I said, the inflation number came out today for March, and it was 8.5% on the consumer price index year over year increase. So just, that's the highest increase since 1981. And so with those types of high inflation rates, mortgage rates and treasury bond rates all have to rise, because people who are going to ultimately buy mortgage bonds or treasury bonds want to be compensated for that inflation. They don't want their principal to be eaten away by the inflation. So that's why the rates are rising, is because of the inflation, and the inflation was caused, like I said, by both the pandemic supply chains, but also our monetary response to it.
Well, and we talked about this the other day too, was, some of our, government trying to hedge their bets on a recession and trying to get ahead of that, was also increasing the rates very aggressively on secondary homes, vacation homes, investment properties. And that's hitting a lot of people that, I think we begrudge investors, but at the same time, we have a shortage of rental product. Therefore, you need people to buy homes and buy product, multifamily product, to be able to be rented back out. But I've had my investors go, what the heck is going on? Why has it jumped so much more, and not in relation to the primary residential loans? And so as doing my conversation, it's because just like in obviously 2007, the first thing somebody's going to dump if they do become into a financial, crisis or crunch is not going to be their primary home. They're going to try to keep their primary residence in the roof of their family's heads, but they might default or do something on a secondary home, an investment property, a vacation home. What they're not accounting for is that we have the largest shortage and highest demand of housing we have ever seen. So even that, I had a house that I had a buyer close last week, and fantastically with your title company, who helped us get the deal done, and we were all pacing and in it together, and it was a day. And normally when you see a house going into foreclosure, the seller is underwater and not going to really make any money. The seller still made $170,000.
Well, and that's, so people talk about, is there a housing bubble? I mean, that's kind of the question that a lot of people are asking. And I would say we certainly have had significant price appreciation, which in some ways resembles a bubble, right? Because a bubble has price appreciation as well. But the concept, when somebody uses the word bubble, that means, is it rising in a way that is going to pop in a dramatic fashion? And, unlike in 2007 into 2008, we created a bubble there because of the mortgage lending practices of the day. And, those of us in the industry back then in the mid 2000s, 2005, 6, and 7, we kind of knew that there was some weird stuff happening that was going to end poorly for some people. I didn't know exactly the magnitude of it. But like when I fast forward to today, we've had significant price appreciation once again, but like, it's not really something artificial in terms of mortgage lending. It's more the supply and demand, and back to where are you going to put your money? And I think, like I said, stocks and bonds are not the place to put money, and under your mattress is not the place to put money in an environment like this. And so, maybe a barrel of oil or something like that would be a good investment. But like, a house is at least a little bit of an inflation hedge, and so. I think when you have supply and demand like it is, and the inflation hedge aspect of a real estate investment, I feel pretty good about this not being the big dramatic bubble waiting to pop.
Well, and Britt, we're going to get to Carla's question in just a second, but I want to kind of quote one of my, she's actually my favorite comedian, and that's Kathleen Madigan. I don't know if you do listen to Kathleen Madigan, chime in and let me know that you're a fellow lover of her, but she has this great skit, and it's talking about buying a house during that time frame that you were discussing. And she said, I knew it was a problem when I walked into my bank and they were like, what do you do for a living? And she said, well, I'm a comedian. And the lady goes, oh, so you're a birthday clown? And she was like, sure, birthday clown. Why don't you try that and see what it spits out? And she goes, sure enough, birthday clown got me $350,000 loan. And she's just this big skit about it, that if you didn't know there was an issue, if a birthday clown can buy that type of a house, there's a problem. And so that's where we were: stated income, subprime lending, all of these other things. But part of that problem is the fact that I think we have 170,000 licensees in the state of Texas, and I'm going to get the percentage wrong, but it is somewhere in the regards to like 50% have been licensed for less than 5 years. So that means most of our realtors have only practiced in this bull market. And that, I think, is part of the issue, is context. You were in the marketplace in the 2000s. I was in the marketplace in the 2000s. And I think that helps us kind of reframe our thought process a little bit better. But like Carla, she brought up, has anyone heard of large volume buying by investors that are backed by government loans and grants? That she heard it on a podcast. I'm not going to put you on the spot if you haven't heard about it, but is that anything you've heard, Britt?
I don't know about the government grants and loans, but I mean, there are these giant REITs. There's the one actually based here in downtown Dallas, Invitation Homes or whatever. And I mean, that's what they're doing, is they're buying. I mean, it like I said, I don't think it's government money, although they probably do buy it with leverage, just like other real estate investors do. But like, they're buying so many homes to turn into single family rentals. And so when I was talking earlier about all the $100,000 homes going away, and and maybe they're worth 200 now, but they're not even trading. They're in the single family rental pool. And so that is sort of, a new asset class that, didn't really exist for the most part 15 years ago. And then only after the meltdown did some of these companies, you know, the Blackstones of the world and Starwoods and whoever else, you know, these big pools of money started buying, you know, so we definitely are seeing those types of entities buying in this market. As far as I know, they're not selling. I don't know any of them that are selling. They're still looking to purchase strategically. So that has been a big contributor, frankly, to the supply shortages, that you have a lot of the inventory that used to be freely traded is now in the single family rental pool, owned by a lot of large companies. So yeah, I mean, again, we're talking, if you want context, we're talking, it's a few percentage points. It's less than 5% of the market, less than 5%, but like it makes a difference when that's the marginal number of homes that would be added to free up inventory and all of a sudden, have inventory that then people could sell and then become buyers of another, so it does add up. But like I said, it's not a huge part, but it's a big number of houses, when you start, it may be only a few percentage points of the overall housing market, but that's a big number that didn't exist 15 years ago.
I'm going to flavor the percentage that I actually don't know what the percentage is, but I will tell you, I go down rabbit holes very frequently in our MLS because that data is there. And so if I look in the $300,000 to $400,000 price point, and I look in, all of the adjacent DFW counties that aren't super rural, that are still in our, dense suburban area, I would venture to say that at least 30% of the sellers in that price point are iBuyers and hedge funds. So there's a faction that are buying and holding, and there's a faction that are buying and immediately selling. And so two different business models, and both eating up our inventory, rightfully so. But that's what's happening. And I will tell you, I just had a house that was in Watauga, and I knew it was probably going to be looked at. I actually had an investor that has owned it since the day it was built, 15 years ago. He's in San Antonio and was going to offload that house to buy something there. And I knew it was probably going to be several investors that were going to be looking at it. And I did and this is what people need to hear. I think the interest rates going up also maybe dials back the aggression of the offers or the amount of offers just a little bit. And that's not a bad thing. But a very simplistic KB home, with a tenant in place that's moving out soon, nothing fancy about it. I got 7 offers. And it was listed at 3.25. So before you might have had 20 offers or something else like that. But the top 3 offers out of that were people that were going to primarily occupy the home. Yeah. And the lowest offers were actually the hedge fund buyers. And so we are sitting there and seeing that shift a little bit. And I think that's something that people need to watch and be cognizant of, that at some point investors do have a threshold. They're going to try to bank on numbers. They're going to throw out, 25 different offers. And if they get 4 at an advantageous price, then they're okay. But I want to encourage people that are buying in that $300,000 to $400,000 price point. You do still have an opportunity. And there are still, I'm not going to say listing agents are bad, that they don't consider this, but I have conversations with my sellers that, hey, let's look at the full big picture. And if somebody's going to occupy the home versus just buying it as an asset or an investment, that other person is more emotionally invested and therefore might be a more pot committed buyer. And so we need to take those things into consideration. And also, I'm not leaving money on the table, but that means maybe I'm countering the person that's going to use their VA benefits. And I think they should have an option to actually utilize those in this market, even without an appraisal waiver. And maybe they're really close to the cash investor. But I can still counter them. And guess what, people? On financing and everything else, an appraisal waiver, which you can't use on FHA and VA, it's still a piece of paper. I don't know if people are aware of that, Britt, but you you are owner of a very well-known title company here in North Texas. And do people default on contracts sometimes?
We occasionally have seen that. Yeah, it's happened once or twice. Yeah,
it's happened once or twice. So I think that's what we need to be thinking about when, as realtors, we're exhausted in this marketplace, that people can still default. And with interest rates rising and different things happening like that, if they're not locking in rates, or maybe they see another house that they like or something else, just stop. I think if we can have better conversations around solid offers and what that looks like, again, we can help our people that are in affordable price points. And by affordable, we mean more of that entry level, which unfortunately now is 300 and above for most areas. So just that's more of my pet peeve. Have good conversations and realize an appraisal waiver is still a piece of paper, people. That's not going to get you some peace of mind at nighttime. But it is a good gut check. But it doesn't mean anything.
Well, the other thing, you were saying something just a second ago, your example of, only, going from 15 offers to, something like 6 or 7. And, just thinking about how people hear that term, most people hear that as a negative. Like, I think like, oh, they only got 6 or 7 offers. And I think, oh my gosh, that's so awesome that we're getting closer to something that's back to normalcy, because I mean, whatever the huge, ridiculous numbers are of these offers on the houses, is not healthy. I mean, it's great if you're the list. Well, I'm not even sure it's great if you're the listing agent. At some point, you just want 1 or 2 really good offers, but you're having to deal with all that. But meanwhile, I mean, the poor buyers and buyer agents, that just they have good people and want to buy a house who are qualified, but they can't find. It's not healthy the way it's been. So these rising interest rates are something that in a way is a good thing. I mean, I hate to say it, but we really do need to be putting the brakes on a little bit. And that's what the Fed is doing. And that's what bond investors who are requiring higher interest rates to buy the bonds and buy mortgage-backed securities. And so these rates rising, most people hate higher interest rates, but yet it's actually the recipe for success that we need for the market to get healthier again.
And I think that's the problem is, again, as realtors, we have to understand what that means, because when somebody asks us, we should be the trusted professional to be able to answer those questions. Oh my gosh, interest rates are rising and I can't find a house and it's already been so difficult. And what you should do is reframe the conversation. Hey, what this could actually do is put some other people on the sidelines that aren't comfortable or don't have the stomach to purchase right now. Or it's going to dial back the aggression of the offers, because now they have to take into consideration that their monthly payment is going to go up. So they need to be a little bit more pragmatic in what that looks like. And you and I all along have said, this is where your sweet spot is. And now this is our time to strike and our time to shine. And understand, you don't have to be at 5.25 for the next 10 years. Rates probably will and potentially come back down in the next year or two. It could be 6 months, it could be 18 months, but the likelihood is there might be a little bit period of a dip down. And at that point, you have a home. Now you get to refinance. So you get the benefit of the lower rate, but you have the locked in asset. You have the home. It's yours. You don't have to be concerned about that. And so that's even how my investors are acting on the multifamily product, because when you're talking about 6.5%, is where we're at right now, with 25% down and great DTI and all of this other stuff. And so my investors are even saying, you know what, I can't control the interest rates, but I can still buy something now, and now is a great time to buy. And I think that's what we need to be having those conversations with whatever our client type is put it in context that, yes, Britt, it is a good thing that interest rates are going up, because it'll make somebody a little bit more skittish and stay on the sidelines. So Bill's obviously chiming in. He said, let's ask FHA to lower the annual MIP. Bill, from your lips to God's ears, maybe that's something that would help us out just a little bit.
We'll see. Yeah, like I said, I trying to predict government action these days, really for the last, decade has been pretty hard to predict. So that one maybe harder to get than I guess if we all get together, right? We talked about being with Tree Pack and all that, being a good one collective voice. Maybe Bill's onto something.
Maybe we can, but I always say, follow the money. And if it's making money, then it's probably not going to be changed. And so, Bill, I'm not saying it's a pipe dream, but we can all hope that that's actually going to happen. So something else we had talked about, Britt, when we were discussing that foreclosure deal that I closed with Fair Texas was, I said, what is going on? Because your team over there at the Allen office, who is fantastic, I'm going to give them a shout out. But they were saying that they had so many files that were so just clunky and had so many different layers and variables of duress. And so I was like, is this really common? So you kind of had some commentary on that, a little bit of insight.
Well, if you think about it, there are a lot of people, as we were talking about earlier, when we get all these stories of multiple buyers, right? A lot of your people who are kind of interested in selling are kind of hesitant to sell because they don't know where they're going to go. If they lock in a sale of their house today, like, are they sure they're going to be able to get something under contract and closed in time to move out of their current home and into whatever home they are purchasing? And so there is this that's why one of the reasons I keep saying we need to get back to a healthier market where people can be not scared to put their house on the market. So the funny part of the implication of that fear is a lot of those normal sellers, I'll call them, are remaining on the sidelines and not selling. Mm-hmm. And so then at the title company, our mix of transactions ends up being a larger percentage being involuntary sellers. And what I mean by that are estates and divorce situations and things like that, where people just really have to sell. And so that, and that leads to harder transactions for title companies and for realtors and lenders and everybody else, just because there's a whole lot more hoops to jump through. So it is interesting right now that, in times like this, when, you don't really think about the fact that a lot of the would-be sellers sitting on the sidelines hurts from a percentage standpoint. A lot of our deals just get harder on average because a lot more dead people and divorced people. So
that's always great. Dead and divorced. Yeah. Those are the two dealers that we love to hear in real estate.
Yeah, everything that's been going on in the world, that's probably also true. I mean, just in absolute numbers, not just percentages. Yeah. So it's been an interesting ride for sure.
Well, that's why I'm wearing camouflage, because I feel like I'm always going to battle right now, and that's okay. I had a long-term client who, luckily, I work with a lot of great people who definitely see my value and what I do and how I advocate for my clients. And they were talking to me today, and they're like, Ashley, I don't know how you're keeping up at this pace. And I said, this too shall pass, and I do have to look at it as an opportunity. And while I am exhausted, this is where I have to dial it up, because when we do have all these extra layers and these barriers of entry, whether it's for a buyer or issues for a seller or anything and this is when the true professionals need to come out and really need to dial it up a notch, because this industry needs us and we need to be advocating for our clients at a completely different level. And you're absolutely right. The estates, and the divorces, and then relocations. So relocation isn't necessarily a duress situation, but it is usually an emotional sale, because they're having to relocate. And who wants to relocate in this state of the world at this moment? And so all of those are highly emotional transactions as well. And so, that's something that we talked about. Putting your team together right now is so extraordinarily important, because everybody's trying to get into the lending business. Everybody's trying to divest into the title business, and people don't realize, they think it's just a dime a dozen. Oh, I can put it in a loan app and poof, I'll get a pre-approval and get a loan, right? And the same thing for title work. I mean, all you guys do is facilitate some paperwork at the day of closing. So
we just get signatures. That's all we get.
You just get signatures. So I mean, what the heck do you do? But that is, I think, so important for people to understand. Again, advocate for your team. Put credible people together. And now more than ever, you need that lender that is going to be in communication and local and be available to you, because there are a lot of different nuances. And for my buyers with that situation, the lender actually got the loan done in 18 days. Unfortunately, the trustee on the foreclosure didn't get the payoff until the day before it was going to foreclosure. So that wasn't the lender's problem. But at the same time, I mean, that's one of those things where understanding the importance of it. And my buyers were originally approved with an online, call service lender. And I'm like, no, It's not going to happen. We're not going to do that. But they've had so many bad experiences. But at the end, that was their testimony. And I even saw it online and said, Chad was on top of his game and has been the best experience we've ever had. And so for them who had demonized lenders for several transactions that they did, we need to be doing a better job of advocating for our trusted vendor partners. And you guys at Fair Texas are another one. I mean, again, we were all pacing the hallways when that was going on. I mean, we've got Janetta and Melanie over there as two of the escrow officers, and we were in their office. They were on speakerphone. We're all sweating. I literally packed a cooler and set up shop there for 4 hours that day until we were done. And then I personally said, give me the check. I'm running to the trustee myself and I'll make sure it's done. But it's having those people that do battle with you that's so incredibly important right now. So we don't have a lot of time left, but
I'm proud of our team and that example. But and the reality is for consumers, picking their realtor by referral, mm-hmm. Not picking the one from the who cuts their hair and has dabbled in real estate for the last year and has maybe looked at a house or two and thinks they're again, everybody's got to start somewhere, but you
don't cut your teeth in this market. You can't cut your teeth in this market. And again, it's not that person doesn't deserve the opportunity to become a credible realtor. But this is where, if you're a new licensee and you're watching this as well, hitch your wagon. And I'm not saying to a team, because I'm not always big on teams, but to an office. Make sure there are the active managers, brokers, mentors, people that are going to sit there and walk alongside you, because what we do, and I keep on saying this, it is a privilege. And I think we're forgetting that right now. It's a privilege to help people exchange the largest asset and the most important thing that changes the trajectory of their lives. It builds generational wealth. It can be the difference sometimes in having a harmonious, family life or whatever that is. And so I think we forget, when we're all running on low fuel and on fumes at this point, we still have to understand it's real estate. And what we do has a large impact on a micro level and a macro level. And I think we all just have to take a deep breath sometimes. But I've talked about this, even with the large offices, we were a part of larger global brands. There's nothing wrong with it. But at some point, we've devalued what our services are as individual realtors and as large offices, because it becomes volume based. Because when you have these cut rate brokers, flat fee brokers, transaction-based brokers, it does start to dilute the effect of the others. So the traditional compensation for brokerages means they're actually dialing back on the services that they're giving realtors. And so, when we sit there and say, oh, don't cut your commission, and how dare they? But we're doing the same thing to the infrastructure of support to our realtors and our agents. And so that's why the managers used to be your best advocate, the person that was going to dig into the trenches with you. And now they're robo dialers and recruiters. And again, there's nothing, it's a business model and it works, but people want to wonder why we don't have. I had the guy sit there and say today, why is the barrier of entry so low? And why is the barrier of people staying in the business so low? And it's a good question. And I think we could all hold each other a little bit more professionally accountable. But I go back to, again, like you said, Britt, hire a true professional. If you don't feel like you're getting adequate representation, then you need to speak up, because everybody deserves representation in this market. But you get what you pay for. If you ask for a discount, you're going to get discounted services, and that's across the board.
But work by referral too.
Thank you.
Again, anybody who, you want to know what they've done, because like I said, we've all seen the horror stories of, literally somebody saying, well, I think so-and-so is a realtor, I'm going to go use them. And they don't ask if anybody's ever used them or had a good experience.
No.
And, again, I think a really good realtor has amazing value to home buyers and home sellers. But most consumers can't tell or many consumers don't take the time and effort to find out the difference between a good one and a bad one. Many of them just pick the first one they come across on the internet or they're
related to.
Working by referral works, picking your title company, picking your mortgage lender, but it also works on picking your realtor.
Yeah, and I think that's what we have to do. If you're going to literally be in the trenches with somebody that's going to have to literally look at your dirty laundry. I mean, really, if I'm at your house as your listing agent, I'm looking at your dirty laundry at some point, and you have to be comfortable. And that's what I always say to people. You have to trust and respect me. You also have to allow me to be in the driver's seat and you are in the passenger seat. And so this is a team effort. But if you don't trust me to drive on your behalf, I'm not the right fit for you. And that's what you should be asking on somebody that's going to represent you. And I just think we have to get back to that, and we have to demand better. So I do put a lot of that on the consumer. They want something for nothing, and we have to kind of change that ideology a little bit. You don't go to a restaurant and say, okay, that filet mignon is now $37, willing to pay $29. What do you think? I mean, we don't do that when we go out to eat, but we're going to do that with the person that's actually going to have the largest impact on our, financial health ever. And so I caution you. But Bill has a lot of isms, and I like that. The client who pays the least will demand the most, or the client that is a jerk at the ask will be the jerk during the task. And then clarity is kindness. Bill, you have a lot of good wisdom there.
Wisdom.
So wisdom. I appreciate all of that. So we've got 4 minutes left. And so I kind of want to, thank you, Shannon. Yes, the restaurant analogy. And would you hack off the person that's preparing your food? That's the other thing too. And I won't go into that any further. But Britt, we've got a couple minutes left. Give me something. This can be open dialogue, something that's kind of gnawing at you, whatever you want to speak about.
I had somebody the other day say, I hear that we're going to go into a recession. And by the way, a recession has this negative term. We think of depression, right? Like the Great Depression. So first of all, a recession is just 2 straight quarters of declining GDP, which is business activity. And it's measured on a national basis. So it is possible that we will have a recession, but it could be a very small recession, and really it could be a national recession that we don't even feel here because we're having so many people move here. I think we're not going to have declining activity in North Texas. I think it's going to continue to grow with all the relocations. So I would not really worry too much about a recession hitting North Texas and feeling it that much. It may, like I said, on a national basis, that may be coming next year maybe, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be the end of the world. It just means that nationally GDP is declining a little bit, or could decline a little bit. So, but I think North Texas, I think we're insulated.
I think we are insulated. And the other thing that I want people to consider, when you're literally, I bet you everybody knows at least 5 people that are struggling to find employees for open positions, whether in their personal business or in a corporation that they work for. There are jobs. We don't have enough people to fill the active job vacancies, which I think is very different from where we've been in the past when there's been a different, impact as far as what we consider a recession. There will still probably be enough jobs for those that want to work.
Back to, we talk about rising interest rates as being bad, when in this case, there may be some positives to it. There really may be some positives to unemployment going up just a little bit from its all-time lows where we are right now. So I think people getting back into the workforce and, trying to fill those jobs might actually be a positive.
That might be a positive thing. People that actually want to start working again. So, and if anybody's looking for a job, I know plenty of people that have vacancies in the real estate adjacent industry. So you can reach out to me about that as well. I happen to actually be one of those, Britt. So if anybody, I'm gonna use this selfishly as a platform. I am looking for an awesome, partner in crime from the standpoint of, I'd love somebody that has a business development mindset. Somebody that maybe isn't proficient in the real estate business, but is great about being a self-starter and all of those other things. And so I am here. I'm looking for somebody myself. So if you know somebody with a great attitude that doesn't mind to be on the real estate roller coaster and maybe wants to learn something differently, but is great at marketing, great at people, and probably just, is mentally unwell, because why would they get into the real estate market at this point? Have them call me. So that, yes, thank you, Metrotechs, use the platform. So, but I am going to go back to Sherry real quick before we sign off. And she said, and we don't go to the restaurant that has no cars in the parking lot. Use a realtor that knows the business. Man, we've just really hammered this restaurant analogy.
This wisdom, that Bill and Sherry and others have been sharing has been wonderful.
It's been great. And yes, Richard, higher interest rates are not as bad as waiting to buy. And so that's something that we just take everything, because when it comes out of our mouths, people listen. So use proper context and educate yourselves. And if you don't know the answer to something, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. Don't be the smartest person in the room. That was something I learned several years ago. And so I try really hard. And that being the case, Britt, that's why we had you on tonight. So we had another super smart person on the show with us. And specifically, I hope your mom tuned in, because you shared that your mom's never really heard you speak before. And I hope she got to check. Hi. I love it. So it's perfect.
The Carol Burnett, whatever.
Yes, the earlobe. But you did the hi, mom, and we didn't even rehearse that. So that was perfect. But no, I appreciate you taking your time and your evening. I know we're all super busy right now, but to give back to the real estate industry is huge. And Britt, you're fantastic. And if anybody wants to hitch their wagon to a fantastic title company, Fair Texas has locations all over the Metroplex. And I implore you to look them up, because Britt will be there and at the helm. And like Sherry likes to do, you can also give them a hard time if you have any questions. But hi, Britt, from your mom.
Hello, Mom.
I love it. So that's a perfect send off. Sue, thank you for tuning in. Britt, thank you for joining us. And we always appreciate your support, and we hopefully you'll join us.
I appreciate the kind words. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
And thank you.
All right.
Again, appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, and then there's Sherry with a heart, because she loves moms and their kids, even if she likes to give you a hard time, Britt. So,
that's okay.
So there we are. Yes, absolutely. Well, everybody have a fantastic evening. Thank you, Britt. And of course, reach out to me if anybody has any questions. We're here for you guys. And to next time, we will